explain how sending energy, intentions, prayers, affirmations, which come from consciousness, reach those we are sending it to. Chris continues, identical twins have identical DNA to establish the conduit pathway. Is the pathway for consciousness through the oneness field? And can you give us more clues how that works?
Hi, Chris. Multiple questions about consciousness, and I'm really loving to talk about them all. Now, I will give you the best answer I can give you, and I'm going to involve Kryon channeling as well. I love to speak about it, since it's such a mystery in general. I always take a step back, however, and when I'm asked those kinds of things, and I remember something that I've said before, and you'll probably hear it again, even Plato had difficulty defining consciousness. So here comes Kryon with something that's even more complicated that we thought we would ever see, calling it an attribute of physics. So right now, why not give you a little bit of what Kryon has said before we go further? There's one particular channeling that I want to quote from, and here it is. Quote, in basic physics, everything happens in balanced pairs. Nothing is destroyed. In multidimensional physics, it's a bit more obtuse. There is a push-pull kind of system in consciousness where one energy pushes against a membrane. Kryon calls it a brain of potential, and it's either seen and used by the pulling reciprocal potential or not. In other words, you can send it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's received. This is still in the quote. If you really want to get technical, this is also how magnetism works. It's by atoms with too many electrons looking for an atom with too few. Physics looks for balance. It always does. It always looks for balance. It's everywhere, this balancing in physics. So, unquote. Kryon is immediately telling us that consciousness, or the energy of it, needs to have a reciprocal energy to make it complete. Now that's really confusing. Or is it? I just want to ask you, what happens when somebody is in love and it's not reciprocated? It's just one of the worst things you can imagine. That is high consciousness looking for balance. Did you ever consider that? Being in love, just the attributes of loving somebody could be seeking balance. Because it's energy, because consciousness is energy, it has to have rules. Kryon said so. It is energy. Energy always has physical rules, but they're not the ones we expect in 3D. However, that Kryon quote reveals how sending energy might work. Now, imagine, if you will, a push energy, which is you sending some kind of benevolent thought. Consider you're some kind of a transmitter. I say that because Kryon says we are. Now, if the pull energy of the recipient, the one you're sending prayers to, isn't quite matched up with your push energy, that person may not receive anything. What do you think of that? That's another statement Mr. Kryon is making. I'll give you that statement. Here's this other statement Kryon makes. Quote, now, consciousness is also filled with variables, and some of them are concepts like truth, belief, perception, willingness. All of these concepts temper the physics that we are discussing about consciousness. And the chance of the potential fulfillment, getting the recipient, the receiver, who will actually receive it. All that sometimes gets in the way. So the consciousness of sending energy, it's now more complex than we thought. And if consciousness does not travel, how do we even send it? Aha! Now I'm drilling down into your actual question. You can tell that this discussion is really a big one, and I'm just dancing around one aspect of it. I want to continue with some answers, and I'm hoping that they will be the ones that will help you. First, classic multidimensional elements are not place-related. That's a tough one. But there are places in 3D, but not necessarily in multi-D. Now, entanglement, if you know what that is, in this example. I want to show you something. It's a metaphor. Picture, if you wish, in your mind, an enormous giant, huge, so big it's bigger than Earth, who is holding the world in his hands. One hand is placed in the bottom, or even around Australia, let's say, and one is placed right at the top at the North Pole. Then the giant's hands start to get warm. And those two places, well, they also get warm. That would be Australia getting warm, the North Pole getting warm. Question, is the giant sending warmth from anywhere to anywhere? Did the warmth travel from anywhere to anywhere? The answer is no. Since the giant's hands were getting warm together, the warmth was delivered simultaneously to Australia and the North Pole. So do you see, this is a metaphor, and do you see how it's working? If the field is really, really huge, all around the Earth, like the giant, then whatever you put into the field goes everywhere at once. You're not sending from one place to another. You're simply placing it in the field. Like the giant's hand, something is happening with the giant, and energy goes both places at the same time. No sending, not from one place to another. This is how it works, and it's not anything that we have in 3D. Kryon says the field is a multidimensional, enormous energy that is all around the planet. It's the mostly, he said, this is the thing I love, and it is mostly consciousness. How about that? It's thought. So this is where it gets good. Those identical twins, they were able to communicate so well since both transmitter and receiver were in the field, tuned to each other. They only had to think it to place it in the field, tuned to each other normally because their DNA was identical. Since the field is all around us all the time, like the giant, what we think is instantly everywhere. Think of it as instantly everywhere. That's the only way you can solve this. How do you send it? You don't. Those of us with non-identical DNA, just like almost all of us, we have to learn to sense and send a little better than the twins. But we can do what the twins did with practice. And Kryon has said this. And now, finally, I know it's hard. Stay with me. If the field is everywhere, our thoughts of compassion and kindness for others is instantly all over the globe. But according to Kryon, some never receive it, since they are either not interested, too fearful, not ready. And that explains a whole lot about why some get healed and some don't. So with that information, you might ask, then why even try? But Kryon answers that as well in the same channeling. Quote, here it is. If the recipient cannot receive the energy of the benevolence being created, for whatever myriad of reasons that might be there, the energy of your thoughts, they do not dissipate into the ethers. That compassion, those prayers, that intent, they don't dissipate. Instead, they get amplified back to the sender. Do you love that? In a balanced way. Do you remember the push-pull balance? Physics needs to be balanced. Consciousness needs to be balanced. Did you ever attend a gathering of meditators or those who were praying and you felt so much better when you left? Now you know why. It's all part of the laws of consciousness connected to a partner called the field. I know. It's pretty technical. I know it's not necessarily what we expect, but we're not talking about stuff that we use and understand. We're talking about what Kryon said is almost magic. I hope this helps you to at least show you that there is a system and that we can learn to use it.
Wow, Lee, that is such a complex subject and
complex answer.
I really admire you bringing all that forward. And I think, would I be correct, Lee, that it's like explaining the internet to a goldfish in some ways?
You have a way with words, Mon. I never thought of that, but Yeah, I think so, because if Plato couldn't understand it, and I'm not about ready to explain it that well, but I like to quote Kryon.
No, there's some really, really valuable quotes there from Kryon, and I think we're still just scratching the tip of the iceberg about consciousness, but I think if we try to keep the simplicity of it, what you said last was that we go to the effort of sending energy, and they either receive it or not for a myriad of reasons, and it's never destroyed. That
it always
energy
comes back to us.
If it doesn't go to that person, it's amplified and comes back to you.
Okay, I promise that the next questions will have simpler answers and shorter answers.
But I think that was a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
And how we ended it. So if you're out there totally confused by all of it, just remember
and you're not alone.
You're not alone, but just remember, love finds its way to those open to receive it, and then it comes back to you. I think it comes back to you regardless, that infinity loop. But for those who don't pick it up, it comes back amplified. What a beautiful system, the love of the Creator. Okay, next question. Here we go. It's Hannah from the Netherlands. And Hannah is asking, when a perfect, complete, beautiful baby dies in the womb and the mother must give birth, the baby will not take its first breath on earth. And so Hannah's question is, will that soul be with her mother the rest of the mother's life? Is there a difference?
Hannah, thank you. That's such a beautiful question. The answer is yes. That soul will be with that mother all of her life as in soul sharing. She did not have to take her first breath. I remember in this linear way we think of being told that if a person was in the darkest jungles and they never got baptized in a certain way by a certain church, then God would punish them forever and their children and torture them, even if they were a beautiful soul who had awakened to the love of God. These are the rules we learn, and they're the rules that don't make any sense. These are the kinds of things that shape our spiritual culture, I'd say, our narrative of the questions about how God works. Let's paint a love logic picture for ourselves to see what it might look like, and that helps us to answer that question without ever even asking it. The child comes into the womb. It's expected, it's loved, and before it's born. It's loved before it's born. You know that. If you're a mom, you're in love with that child, carrying it for those 9 months. It spends 9 months connected to the soul of the mom, and then it comes to full term. Then for some reason the child passes over before it takes its first breath. Perhaps it became entangled with the cord or something else. It could be a myriad of things. Question for all of us. Is that beautiful son or daughter any less of a son or a daughter because it couldn't take its first breath? The answer is no. It is very much the beloved offspring if it had lived. Perhaps the plan was to kick the mother in grief so she might ask herself deep questions about her existence. Even her self-worth might be severely tested. She may make decisions she would never have made otherwise. More than a child that didn't make it, that soul becomes the teacher and the guide and gets the name that was reserved for it by the mom. That's how love works. And that soul will be there until the last breath of the mother. Then they'll meet in a different way on the other side of the veil, and together they will rejoice in the journey that they took together.
What a beautiful message, and I hope that gives you comfort, Hannah, and thank you for asking that question. I'd like to do one more question before Lee and I move into a discussion of all things Kryon. Joe from Long Beach in California is saying,